Hello everyone and welcome to the Balconia Garden podcast. This is where we talk about all things container gardening, both indoor and out, and you can find tips and tricks for growing a flourishing container garden, regardless of the size, shape or space that you have. Welcome to episode 11. Today I would like to share with you 4 easy ways for you to maximize any growing space that you have, regardless of the size it is, whether it's a balcony garden, whether it's on a terrace that you have outside your home, whether it's an indoor garden, just a couple of pots that you have on your kitchen windowsill, whatever your growing space looks like. When I incorporated these 4 things into the way I gardened on the balcony garden, I just found that everything got so much easier and I was able to grow more plants, which was my goal on the balcony garden. I've actually done a video already on this topic, so I will link it down below. And it'll provide some nice visuals for you on these things I'm going to talk about. Also, just to mention, I actually have a YouTube channel as well. It's called Balconia Garden, and you can listen to this podcast on the YouTube channel, and you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify. The account is called Balconia Garden Podcast. Let's get to it. So tip 1 on how to maximize your growing space is to get organized. And you get organized by creating activity zones. I think this is actually a feng shui concept where in any kind of space that you're either living in or working in or gardening in, you have, even in a small room, for example, you have separate parts of this space for certain activities that you do. Of course, when we're talking about gardening, we have this sort of added dimension to it where we really need to look at the aspect of any growing space that you have. Basically, the aspect is where, or is the direction in which your garden space is facing. So how much sun you're getting a day, how intense is the sun? Because this is going to determine where your activity zones will be, and also what plants you can grow and where you're going to place them. So on the balcony, I arranged these activity zones based on how much sun I got a day. And of course, what plants I was growing, because not all plants like a lot of sun. If I'm growing a cool season plant like a lettuce or salads, they prefer cooler temperatures and they don't like the heat of the sun. So I placed these plants in cooler areas of the garden. And for the full sun plants like basil, tomato, peppers, aubergines, things like that, I placed them in areas where they got full sun. So once I'd found the perfect places for the plants I was growing, I then looked at the spaces that I had left over. So on the left-hand side of the balcony, it was always in shade, and this is where I stored all my tools. It was the cooler part of the balcony. I also didn't want to waste any sunlight, so I tended to grow less things on that side of the balcony. I should say the balcony was 3.5 meters by 2 meters, so it was a really small space, but what I found so fascinating was how even in this small space, there was such variety in temperatures, in light. Like on the left hand side of the balcony in winter, I would tend to get like moss as well because it was so shady and protected. And actually one time there was even fungus coming out of the wooden decking. Whereas on the other side of the balcony, which was literally a few meters away, that never happened. It was really interesting. So yes, on the left side, I would have that as sort of my storage area. On the right hand side of the balcony, this would receive sun and shade throughout the day. And so I placed plants that liked full sun at the top of that area. I had a tiered plant shelf, so I would put the full sun plants at the top of the shelf, and then at the bottom I would put more cool season plants. And then just by the window underneath, that's where I had my table and chairs. It was a bit shadier, and it was also a really gorgeous place to watch the sunset. And this was sort of the entertaining area. So in this tiny space, I had a storage area. I had a full sun plant area. I had cool season plant area, and then I had a mixture, and then I also had an entertaining space. And I just really felt that having these zones kept everything nice and neat. It reduced the clutter. It also helped me find the perfect place for the plants. And it meant I could enjoy the balcony as well because there was enough space and a place for me to sit out and chill. So yes, before you start anything, get organized, look at your space, and then create these little zones of activity. The second tip is to invest in hanging baskets. The humble hanging basket, what a game changer. It might seem simple, but it absolutely transformed the way I gardened, and it also allowed me to grow so much more produce. I used hanging baskets of all shapes and sizes. I would hang them off any edge possible. I even used to hang hanging baskets off hanging baskets, and it just allowed me to grow so much more food and herbs and even flowers. You know, it doesn't always have to be an edible garden that you're growing. I also had a lot of flowers there just for the pollinators, but also because it's just really pretty and it would add a sort of dimension, a different dimension to the green space. It also allowed the floor to remain free, so there was more space for other pots. Of course, you don't need to ram your space full of pots if you just want some space to walk around in or lie in. Hanging baskets will allow you to keep this bottom space, the floor, nice and free and open. And I really grew so many things. I grew salads, herbs, peas, strawberries, all in these hanging baskets. So I would invest in your hanging baskets, make sure that you've got some drainage holes in them. And of course, actually, I should have mentioned this before, I've mentioned it in other videos, but if you are growing food in pots, make sure that they're food grade plastic. The next tip to maximising your growing space is to grow vertically. So if you don't have any space to grow outwards, grow upwards. I used things like tiered plant shelves to shove as many plants onto this shelf as possible. As it was tiered, it allowed all the plants to receive sun, but it was also kind of narrow enough to be just placed against the wall, and it didn't take up too much space. I used trellises as well for broad beans, for cucumbers, and I used teepees for my peas. I also created different levels for the pots. So there was I used chairs or stools, anything that I could find just to pop the plants on top. It also made the balcony much more attractive. I'm very into making a space as beautiful as possible as well as functional. And I find that when you have your pots growing on different levels, it just is so pleasing to the eye. It's just this kind of classic design trick. So if you like to have a beautiful space as well as a productive one, like I do, that's also something to try. And lastly, on the balcony, there was also the tiered roof shelves. Again, creating space and still allowing all the planters in the pots to receive all the light that they need. And the last tip to maximising any growing space is to invest in things that fold. So I loved chilling on the balcony. As I mentioned before, I had a small table and chairs from IKEA. They were just the perfect size for the balcony. And one of the great things about them was that they would fold away. So when I wanted more space, I could just fold them away. If I was having, a friend over, or even if I just wanted to chill on the balcony, I would use the table and chairs. And they were very easy to store as well. And if I decided that the weather was lovely and I maybe wanted to do a little bit of tanning, I would fold up the table and chairs and then whip out a folding time mattress and then just chill, surrounded by all these gorgeous plants in the middle of the city. So yes, invest in things that fold. So those were 4 easy ideas for how to maximise any growing space. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did and you would like to support the channel, subscribe. I'm sending you all my good wishes and I will connect with you in the next podcast. Goodbye.